I already know that today's video is going to make a lot of people upset because we're talking about all the reasons why people are leaving Richmond. I can see the comments flooding in now, and that's okay. I will survive. If you're not afraid to face the hard facts about living in Richmond, stay tuned. So I got to say this up front. I love Richmond. I'm a realtor and I'm constantly encouraging people to move here to the city. So you're probably wondering, why would I make a video like this? Well, the fact is Richmond is not for everybody, and there are good reasons why people are leaving. I want to make sure that anybody who's looking to me for advice knows just what they're getting into if they decide to move here, okay? So with that said, let's jump into all the reasons why people are leaving Richmond. There is a housing affordability crisis in the US right now because of elevated interest rates, rising home prices, and historically low inventory. Millions of Americans just cannot afford to buy a home. And COVID certainly didn't make that situation any better. Currently, the median sale price for a single family home here in Richmond is $415K, where the median household income for a couple in Richmond is $128K. Recently, there was a report in Credit News indicating that 56% of Richmond's neighborhoods are unaffordable for your median two-person household. Los Angeles ranked worst in their report, with 100% of its neighborhoods being unaffordable. Richmond was number 10, worse than Charlotte, North Carolina, Denver, Colorado, and even Washington, D.C. Richmond is a fantastic place if you can afford it. Unfortunately, a lot of folks are having to seek less expensive alternatives. When someone asks me as a realtor where to find the best schools in Richmond, I have to be very careful. There are just too many factors that go into school performance, and I'm not going to give a direct answer to that question. The fact is, though, that Virginia ranks very high. It's ranked number 10 by the U.S. News and World Report in all the country. So the question is, what are the schools like in Richmond specifically? The Virginia Department of Education publishes quality profiles of each public school in the state. I took a look at those numbers for 22 and 23, looking specifically at math scores, and here's what I found. The average score for all Virginia schools was a 69 in math. Here in the Richmond area, Richmond City average score was a 44, whereas Chesterfield and Henrico counties had 65. In Fairfax and Arlington in Northern Virginia, the scores were 75 and 78. Virginia Beach, 77, still a full 33 points higher than Richmond City. So I think it's probably obvious. Families that are looking for public schools with the highest test scores are probably going to be looking at Northern Virginia and Virginia Beach. 40 years ago, Richmond was known as one of the murder capitals of the U.S. At the time, it had a homicide rate 7 times the national average. Here in the city, sometimes at night you'll hear noises and think, were those fireworks or were those gunshots? Richmond does still report higher crime rates than average, 114% higher than the state average and 59% higher than the national average. If that's all people knew about Richmond, I could understand why they would want to get out of Dodge. Before you make any final judgments about Richmond, consider a few things. Number one, all cities are going to have crime. The more people, the more crime. Lexington, Kentucky has 17% less crime, but Orlando, Florida has 41% more. Second, the majority of crimes here in Richmond are property crimes. In fact, the violent crime rate in Richmond is 3% less than the national average. Only 1 in 216 people is going to be the victim of a violent crime here. And third, remember that crimes are hyper-localized. The Richmond Police Department has identified 21 hotspots around town. If you avoid those, your chances of being the victim of a violent crime go way down. Now, there are safer places than Richmond, but please understand this, Disney World is not one of them. Well, let me pause for a quick public service announcement. If you're thinking about a move to Richmond, you're going to want an agent on your side who knows the city inside and out. Somebody knows all the secret spots where you can get an especially good deal or knows the best strategies for winning in a competitive situation. My team and I are excited to do that for you. My number's on the screen below. Send me a text. Give me a call. I'll get right back to you. Politics has pulled some people toward Richmond and pushed some people away. You probably already know this, but a red state is one that consistently votes Republican, whereas a blue state does the same for Democrats. A purple state tends to go back and forth between red and blue. So what is Virginia? Between 1968 and 2004, Virginia consistently voted Republican, but that changed when Barack Obama ran for president. Ever since then, Virginia has consistently voted blue in the presidential elections. It's mostly been true for the governors as well. Yet in 2021, Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, won the office. Currently, with the Republican governor and the Democratic General Assembly, there's a lot of conflict and not always a lot of progress. So what are the politics like here in Richmond? Well, that depends on whether you're talking about Richmond City or the counties that surround it and make up Metro Richmond. Richmond City is solidly blue. It's had one Republican mayor since 1870. The closest counties of Chesterfield and Henrico also vote consistently Democrat, whereas the outlying counties of Goochland and Hanover New Kent, they tend to vote Republican. Maybe this is more info than you were looking for, but I think you can see why a diehard Democrat or a diehard Republican may choose to move to another state that votes more consistently the way that they do. No matter where people live, they always have one thing in common. They love to complain about the taxes. And that's definitely true here in Richmond. The income tax in Virginia is 5.75%, a good bit higher than North Carolina, that's 4.5%. It's lower than Maryland with 8.95%. Virginia's sale tax is 6%. But then there's a meals tax, unexpected surprise when you order your food at a restaurant. 4% in Henrico, 7.5% tacked onto your bill in Richmond City. Real estate taxes are the biggie. Now the rates are fairly reasonable in the surrounding counties. In New Kent, you're going to pay just 67 cents on every $1,000 of your assessed value. Chesterfield County, it'll be 90 cents per thousand. But in Richmond City, it's 33% higher than that. You're going to pay $1.20 for every 1,000 in property assessments. How does that compare to other cities and states? Well, Charlotte is just 73 cents. Washington, D.C., 85 cents. Fairfax, Virginia, 113, and San Francisco, which always strikes me as one of the most inflated places in the country, $1.18. As property values went up during the pandemic, so did tax assessments. Here in Richmond, they went up 13% each year in 22-23. As a result, Richmond City residents are now paying nearly $1,000 more per year in real estate tax than they did before COVID. And that's causing some Richmonders to move to states where the taxes are lower. Older neighborhoods throughout Richmond, communities like Church Hill and Jackson Ward and Manchester, are undergoing a tremendous amount of change right now. Old homes are being torn down or renovated and rebuilt. New stores and restaurants are rushing in. On the one hand, this seems very positive. Property values are going up. New residents are moving in with fresh energy and vision and money. But for the original residents, this can be hugely disruptive. As property values go up, so do the taxes. They can no longer afford to live in their own communities. They're forced to sell and relocate. This is called gentrification, and it's a huge problem here in Richmond. Though it has certainly improved property values throughout the city, aggressive development has made housing less and less affordable. But there are good people working hard to ensure that neighbors have access to affordable housing. One of those is Urban Hope, which is based in Church Hill on the East End. They understand that a house is more than four walls and a door. It represents security, prosperity, and possibility for the future. If you are a sports junkie and cannot imagine life without box seats in the big stadium, you're not going to stay long in Richmond. You're going to go somewhere like Charlotte, where you've got the Hornets and the Panthers, or maybe Atlanta, where you've got the Hawks and the Falcons and the Braves. You may head north to Philadelphia or New York or Boston. If you were to move to Montgomery County, Maryland, where I lived for a number of years, you'd have 5 professional teams within a 1-hour drive. Baltimore Orioles and the Ravens, Washington Commanders and the Capitals, and my favorite, the Washington Nationals. Now, don't get me wrong, Richmond has more than its fair share of sports enthusiasts. That's why we are setting attendance records every year, giving our local teams the attention that they deserve. I'm a big fan of the Richmond Flying Squirrels, the AA baseball team affiliated with the San Francisco Giants. For soccer, we've got the Richmond Kickers and the Richmond Ivy, our men's and women's team. Denny Hamlin is a local legend. He grew up here in Chesterfield. He's won the race here in Richmond 4 times at the Richmond Raceway. And then there are college sports. VCU and University of Richmond both consistently field great teams. But sports is pretty addictive. And if you need that professional fix every weekend, you probably should pack your bags. Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy during the Civil War. It had the largest market in the U.S. for the buying and selling of enslaved peoples for much of the 19th century. If you go to the site of Lumpkin Jail in Shockoe Bottom or walk along the slave trail, you'll be horrified by the reminders of Richmond's ugly past. but you may not realize that the racial tensions continue to simmer. During the summer of 2020, in response to the murder of George Floyd, protests erupted throughout the city. Monuments of Confederate leaders were dragged down. The phrases Black Lives Matter and I Can't Breathe were graffitied all over town. The turmoil underscored the differing racial demographics here in Metro Richmond. In Richmond City, the numbers are very even, 44% Black, 42% white. But as you get out into the counties, the numbers change. In Henrico County, it's 51% white, 29% Black. And in Chesterfield, 59% white, 23% Black. For many, and I put myself in this category, these tensions are unavoidable and actually somewhat healthy. It's good for me to live in a community next to people from other cultures who don't look and think the same. Forces me to challenge my assumptions. Would it be easier to live in a place where everybody did look just like me? Sure, but it definitely wouldn't be better. And yet some just can't stomach these tensions. It makes them uncomfortable or even scared to be in a place where they're not the majority. And these are the folks who, unfortunately, in my opinion, are choosing to move to places where people do look just like they do. The older you get, the more you realize that the world is not black and white. But in Richmond, it mostly is. Here in the city, we have 44% Black, 42% white. That's almost 90% of the population. The rest is divided between 5% Hispanic, 2% Asian, and 4% other. For a long time, I lived in Gaithersburg, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C. Now, that was a really international place. 39% white, 21% Black, 16% Asian, 13% Hispanic, 11% other. A lot like the population in New York City. Students at the local community college came from over 160 countries. Shopping at Costco was this fantastic experience where you'd hear all kinds of languages with maybe a little English mixed in. And when out-of-town visitors would come to my church, invariably they would say, I feel like I was just in the United Nations. There are pockets of Richmond that are internationally diverse. For example, there's a thriving Hindu center in Glen Allen near Short Pump. But if you're the kind of person who's most happy in a city teeming with lots of languages and lots of cultures, you're probably not going to be most happy in Richmond. So we've just covered some of the worst things about living in Richmond. If you can live with those, I think you're going to love this fantastic city. Just remember to have somebody who's a native, somebody who's got your back if you ever need help. And again, if you're thinking about moving to or from Richmond or anywhere here in the surrounding area, reach out. I'd love to help. In the meantime, I'll see you on the next one.